Today, I am going to uncover a truth very few will ever tell you. Self-hate is not original to you. Self-denial is not a quality of your true nature. Self-loathing is not something you were born with. Instead, shame was slowly implanted in you like an unseen toxin, administered drop by drop through dismissive gazes, harsh criticisms, and long silences. And today, probably your whole existence is shaped by a lie about your true nature, a lie known as shame. Not a healthy shame that teaches boundaries, but a toxic one that insists the fault lies not in what you do, but in who you are. It convinces you that your very existence is a defect, meant to be concealed. To cope, you adopt various disguises. You create multiple versions of yourself in a desperate bid to please, protect, and belong. Yet, every time you perform these roles, you drift further away from your authentic self. This is a profound tragedy that Nietzsche recognized with uncompromising clarity. For him, shame was never a natural flaw, but a man-made construct, a tool engineered by religions and social systems to curb our natural instincts and control our actions. Nietzsche argued that shame's true purpose is not to correct behavior, but to domesticate you, to force you into submission, to reduce your vibrant affirmation of life into a mere whisper. He didn't want you simply to conform to a correct way of living. He yearned for you to break free, invent your own values, and boldly affirm who you are with aesthetic courage. He envisioned a rebirth, a transformation into a free spirit by dismantling the false idols that once defined you. Years later, John Bradshaw would give clinical form to this anguish by labeling it toxic shame. Bradshaw demonstrated how, when internalized in childhood, this poison utterly distorts one's self-image. A vibrant, curious intelligence creates a false self to survive. But this false self comes at a high price. The false walls of protection become walls of entrapment. The toss of mental health is just a consequence. The real loss is that of your identity, your capacity to feel whole. This video is not a solace. It's a solution. It's a confrontation, an invitation to everyone who is exhausted of pretending something they are not, who is tired of molding themselves, tired of hiding. Today, we will expose the shell of shame that binds you, drop the crutches that keep this false self in place, and show you there is a way back. A path of healing, reconnection, and reconstruction. But beware, this path requires courage and grit. The audacity to look at yourself without filters, to face your trapped emotional pain, and releasing mental patterns that keep you accepted but hollow. It is only when you face your mental blocks, your core of shame, your shell of guilt, do they start to lose power. And perhaps, for the first time, you meet yourself. You remember who you are, and that changes everything. Toxic shame is not a fleeting emotion. It is an entire system. It is a barren terrain of beliefs, memories, silences, and unspoken pacts that you crafted in order to weather pain. From the early lessons of organized religion to the relentless pressures of modern media, society has drilled into you that you must always refine and correct yourself. You are taught that you are, at your core, a mistake, a being whose worth is contingent upon the denial of your most authentic impulses. Nietzsche observed this with unsettling clarity, noting that traditional morality, especially that rooted in Christian ideals, did not stem from a pursuit of goodness, but from the resentments of the powerless. He coined the term slave morality to describe a system that inverted life's natural values, exalting renunciation, sacrifice, and blind obedience. Every natural impulse, every surge of instinct, power, and desire was branded as impure, forbidden, and shameful. This systematic repression carves a deep chasm between who you truly are and the role society demands you play. That chasm is labeled as shame, a force that compels you to lower your eyes, apologize for your very existence, and incessantly seek the validation of others, even at the cost of betraying your inner truth. Nietzsche never intended for you to be simply good by society's standards. He urged you to be whole, to live with all the intensity life offers, embracing both light and shadow, mistakes and desires, chaos and beauty. How then can you celebrate life If you have been enculturated to fear it, shame is, in effect, the castration of existence. It strips away your innate creative power. Every imposed standard, be it for spiritual purity, aesthetic beauty, or social success, drives you further away from your genuine self. Moral repression does far more than stifle authenticity. It transforms your essence into guilt, burdening you with a cross that is not rightfully yours. As Nietzsche observed, the values we uphold today were forged in resentment and a denial of life's vibrancy. It is this insurmountable debt of guilt that fuels toxic shame, and its roots are planted long before you reach adulthood, when, as a child, you are scolded for being bad and taught that only perfection can earn acceptance. Every time a natural desire is met with rejection, every tear is met with ridicule. The self divides. Instead of maturing into true autonomy, you learn to suppress, censor, and eventually despise the very parts that make you unique. In this way, you create an internal dissociated self that breeds internal and external confusion. Shame, then, is not an isolated incident. It becomes your identity. Now your acts are not wrong. You are wrong. Your capacity to discriminate between a wrong act and wrong existence is gone. Over time, you transform into your own harshest judge, a relentless executioner of your true self. The brutal reality is that this crushing weight was never divine. It was designed solely to break you. It was designed to bend you, to contract your vast existence into a puny one. Only when you recognize this can the possibility of a liberated existence begins. Even after you come to understand that shame was imposed, it continues to lurk within, embedded in your habits, beliefs, and the internal voice you call I. And here emerges another layer of the problem: the false self, the persona crafted to survive shame and to secure acceptance. You discover you don't own your life because shame has a life of its own. This too must be addressed. If this content resonates with you, I invite you to click the subscribe button and turn on all notifications. Thank you for your support. Have you ever forced a smile while every part of you screamed in silence? Have you ever pretended to be fine, merely to avoid burdening those around you or dimming the atmosphere? This daily exercise, the gap between what you feel and what you outwardly project, is more than simple politeness. It is a survival. John Bradshaw identifies this behavior as the most palpable sign of a deeper wound, the creation of a false self that acts as a facade to hide toxic shame. According to Bradshaw, toxic shame is the transformation of a natural emotion into a pervasive state, one that comes to define your entire self-perception. No longer is shame just a fleeting emotion triggered by mistakes. It becomes the constant lens through which you view your existence. In this state, you stop merely feeling ashamed and instead find yourself defined by shame. You do not feel shame. You are shameful. Ultimately, this relentless internal narrative erodes your identity, forcing you to abandon your true self in order to simply keep going. The spear of shame digs deep. The shame identity affects your biology and your psychology. Children raised amid critical stares, unending reproach, or emotional neglect soon internalize the belief that something is irrevocably wrong with them. They come to think that invisibility implies unworthiness, and this false perception builds an internal prison. Inside that prison, your authentic self, vibrant, spontaneous, and imperfect, gets locked away, replaced by the false self. This mask becomes a protective shield. It smiles when needed, remains silent to avoid conflict, to be useful to avoid abandonment, and adapts to others' expectations to dodge rejection. The echo of tainted relationships work over time to concretize this mask. Now there is no you and the mask. The mask is you. But the fact is, a lie is never enough. Despite its outward functionality and the social approval it may garner, the false self is inherently fragile, always exhausted, anxious, always disconnected. The mask is a performance. Sustaining such a performance demands that you constantly monitor your emotions, adjust your words, and censor your gestures, all in anticipation of rejection. Bradshaw describes this slow erosion as soul murder, a covert yet relentless psychological violence that gradually extinguishes joy, spontaneity, curiosity, and self-love. What remains is a hyper-rational, self-censoring shell, a mere ghost faithfully executing societal roles without ever feeling truly alive. This false self does not dissipate with good intentions or motivational catchphrases. It was deliberately constructed to shield you from pain, loss, and fear. How can you exercise that which you created? Therefore, even when you are aware of this false self, this mask of effort, this cycle of shame, your very effort to eliminate it strengthens it. This is what Jiddu Krishnamurti meant in his core revolutionary statement. The observer is the observed. Nevertheless, acknowledging it is the vital first step toward healing. As long as you continue believing that your true nature is flawed, you will remain trapped behind this armor, merely existing to dodge shame rather than to truly live. This is the junction where Bradshaw, Nietzsche, and Krishnamurti meet. The junction where time meets truth. The key word is dismantling. Healing starts from the core question: where is the lie that acted as a bed for this wound? Imagine building a fortress to protect yourself from the hurts of life. Every stone and barrier you erect serves as a safeguard against pain. Yet, over time, the very walls of protection become the walls of self-imprisonment. The key to freedom is lost, leaving you confined, afraid to feel, to speak, or simply to be. This is the critical juncture where psychological suffering meets existential truth, a point where the trio of John Bradshaw, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Jiddu Krishnamurti converge with groundbreaking precision. And the convergence is a sight to behold. One is a clinical therapist, one is a philosopher of chaos, and one is the mystic of the highest order. Bradshaw sees toxic shame as the poison that distorts identity from childhood onward. Nietzsche, on the other hand, argues that such shame stems from a decadent morality designed to deplete our vital energy. And Krishnamurti sees these walls as a product of time and thought, a psychological crisis that needs attention right now. The most fascinating part is, in all the three cases, the remedy demands a rare courage, a willingness to confront profound pain at its source. Bradshaw implores you to descend into the depths of your psyche, to unearth the wounded inner child who was once labeled too much, ignored, punished, or silenced. Only by rescuing this child, not to cover it with a new mask, but to let it breathe in the air, can you bridge the gap between your fragmented self and your authentic being. But he is clear. This hurts. Unraveling your true nature requires traversing through a valley of confusion, emotions, and self-judgment. It's a plunge into one's own darkness. Nietzsche is one of a destructive temperament. If the false self is your internal prison, then Nietzsche furnishes the hammer necessary to break its bars. He declares shame as a symptom of a culture of denial of the very raw and bare instincts of the body and of the will to power. He regards repression as the foundation of civilization. But this process is not just destruction, it is creation. He is not interested in comforting, but in awakening. Nietzsche calls for a radical deconstruction of the inherited values that have tethered you to shame. Yet, this process is one of both dismantling and creation, eliminating the old to make way for the birth of something new. It is not merely about vanquishing pain, it is about reinventing yourself from the ground up. Krishnamurti brings in the intensity of a blacksmith, yet the precision of a goldsmith. All hurts, all shame, and all guilt are lodged into what he calls as the content of the consciousness. This content is common across the cape of humanity. The content is built up over time by the movement of thought and by the yearning of becoming. This content configures your very brain cells, makes it heavy, makes it cower, lowers its energy, and takes away its vitality, its suppleness. The dismantling of this content cannot come about by another act of becoming or any forward action of self-improvement. By discarding the crutches of dependence on systems, authorities, religions, gurus, and institutions, he frees your impersonal awareness to unfurl this content of your consciousness. The very process brings forth a psychological transformation, a fundamental change in the brain cells themselves. As per Krishnamurti, a new dawn of truth can only come forth through the burnt ashes of the old. And here lies the most fascinating point. Bradshaw speaks of healing, Nietzsche of creation, and Krishnamurti of cracking the shells of time. A seasoned mind knows all three complement each other. The journey to reclaim your true identity is not achieved through empty affirmations or promises of an instant cure. The shame residing within you is not a simple emotion. It is an intricate network of beliefs, memories, silences, and personal bargains forged in the crucible of pain. To rebuild who you are, you must revisit the very moment when you surrendered your wholeness for the sake of acceptance. That pivotal moment is when you allowed yourself to become fragmented. John Bradshaw guides us through this challenging passage with unwavering clarity and deep compassion. He portrays the inner child not as a mere symbol, but as a living part of you still patiently waiting to be recognized. This inner child was stifled for expressing too much, punished for feeling deeply, neglected when it needed care, and ridiculed for its authenticity. To survive the onslaught of external judgment, it learned to hide behind layers of self-created defenses. Yet, despite these barriers, it has never truly disappeared. It remains at the very core of your anxiety, in the quiet after every achievement, in the unnamed anger, and in the trepidation of revealing your true self. Healing, then, is about approaching that inner child without judgment. The language the inner child uses is backwards. It cries for help. But the words that it uses is, "Get away from me. Leave me alone." Bradshaw calls this profound act the reintegration of the fragmented self. It is the moment when you stop living behind a mask forged by shame and begin to express your genuine essence, no matter how tender or trembling it might be. Understand that this healing journey is not a straight line. It involves setbacks, unexpected breakthroughs, and the gradual quieting of outdated internal voices. These voices, remnants of external criticisms, saying, "You are weak, you are too much, you don't deserve," are echoes of old and defunct programming. They are echoes of a bygone time, of a bygone world. Through conscious effort and compassion, you replace these manipulative messages with a narrative rooted in self-acceptance and truth. And it is here that Nietzsche echoes again. To embrace life means to embrace all of it, the pain, the failures, and even the absurd. It takes immense courage to look at your scars and still proclaim, "This is me, and I am no longer ashamed." True healing is not about erasing pain, but about unveiling your authentic self. It is the same unfurling that Krishnamurti talked about, only a choiceless awareness, steeped in non-judgment but palpable with seriousness, unravels that what you are. Rescuing your inner child is a radical, even a revolutionary act, one that transforms self-doubt into the realization that even in your brokenness, you remain whole. Even when you are imperfect, you are perfect. Even when you are vulnerable, you are safe. It is a testament to the power of vulnerability as the cornerstone of genuine freedom. Yet, rescuing the inner child is only the first step. You must also construct a new, nurturing world for it. A realm where it can express itself openly, create fearlessly, and thrive without trepidation. This new world is born when you stop bending to others' expectations, when you start nourishing values that spring forth out of this newfound intelligence. Rebuilding yourself is not confined to healing past wounds. It extends to consciously shaping your future. It is time to bring together every fragment of your journey, self-exploration, deconstruction of inherited values, and the healing of that original wound to emerge as a free spirit. Your identity is not simply a byproduct of trauma or external impositions. It is the culmination of deliberate creation, a bold proclamation of who you truly choose to be. True freedom is found in living authentically and refusing to conform to a society that demands self-denial. For years, you may have tried to adapt, believing that if you were calmer, more capable, or more attractive, everything would be fine. But the issue was never within you. It was the relentless conditioning that taught you to be ashamed of your very existence. No love or approval is worth the price of sacrificing your essence. You are not here to become perfect, but to become real. Shame, when faced head-on, no longer needs to dictate your identity. Liberation requires you to use the tools offered by Nietzsche, Bradshaw, and Krishnamurti to varying degrees, depending on your situation. Your constricting shame isn't a chance happening. The cage has been put in place by architects. It were ideas, beliefs, and values, supercharged by your permission, that taught you to doubt yourself. The beliefs sneakily transformed into internal voices that say, denying your desires was a sign of purity, that suffering in silence was a virtue. These are your internal gods, your false idols, watching, impeding, controlling your bare instincts, your raw expression. Friedrich Nietzsche calls forth a brutal and necessary act, the destruction of false idols and revaluation of core values. This destruction is not an act of hate, but lucidity. It is a realization that commandments that govern you were based on fear, not truth. They were built by cultures that demonize the body. Nietzsche doesn't hold back. He calls this the morality of slaves, a regressive system that glorifies weakness, submission, renunciation, because it fears truth, strength, autonomy, and instinct. Something extraordinary happens when these internal gods are killed. The mental process, occupied in guilt and shame, opens up for creation. A creative force awakens. An artist is born that transforms pain into work and shame into power. This process is uncomfortable, but the price is too low compared to the cost of living a life that is not yours. A life that is bold, unapologetic, and free. Your body, your voice, your desires, and your unique story are all valid expressions of life. Living in your truth far outweighs the transient comfort of hiding behind a mask. Nietzsche envisioned this radical authenticity as becoming a free spirit. To be free, you must say yes to life with all its contradictions, to embracing chaos without needing to pretend it makes sense, to affirm your existence even when the world insists you should feel unworthy. Bradshaw translates this call into the internal realm, urging you to reconnect with your genuine self, break the chains of toxic shame, and mend the fractured parts of your identity. Though the journey is arduous, it ultimately liberates you, empowering you to step fully into your life without constant apology. Yes, you can overcome shame. Yes, you can reclaim your identity. But remember, true validation comes only from within. No external certificate can declare you authentic. It must spring from the exhaustion of becoming what others demand and the resolute decision to simply be who you are. As you leave behind the mask and step into true presence, whole, human, and inherently worthy, I invite you to take one final, powerful step. Leave in the comments the simple declaration, I free myself from shame. Write it down, give it a name. For in naming the prison, you begin the journey toward liberation. And if this message resonates, share it with those who need to hear it. There are countless people burdened by shame, mistakenly believing it to be their lot in life. Do not let this be the end. The next video is a crucial part of this journey, a deeper dive into the path we walk together. Your freedom demands that you see it through. I look forward to joining you on the next step of your transformation.